Okay, what we're trying to do is we're trying to help folks understand the history of Dunnellon, Florida. It's a very dramatic history that we have here. There's a lot of substance to it that folks don't understand. We're actually pulling material here from a book by Judge E.C. May. It's called Gator, Skeeters, and Mallory. It was published in the 1950s. By then, E.C. May was an elderly man that had time to write it more or less as a memoir. Mr. May arrived here around 1890 in Citrus County. At that time, he had nothing. He was a very hardworking, smart, and savvy man. He worked himself up from nothing. At the time of this reading, he had started a mercantile business in Hernando in a very small building with $73 worth of merchandise. After several years, he had built it up. By 1897, he had built it up to as much as business as he could do out of Hernando. At that time, he announced to his customers he was going to move his business to Dunnellon. Dunnellon is an unusual place in the way they do business, and somehow through the entirety of the existence of its town, their culture and way of doing business has not been altered, which is pretty remarkable. I'll read it right out of Judge May's words. As soon as it was known that I was moving to Dunnellon, I was waited on by a representative of the Dunnellon merchants and advised to stay where I was. I had done a wonderful thing for Citrus County and next to the impossible in merchandising, and I was admired and liked personally, but this was business. If I came to Dunnellon, friendship was out the window. Sounds about right. They would band together and put me out of business and ruin me, and that would make them sad. But business was business, and Dunnellon was sewed up tight. It was a credit town and was owned by a tight combination of a few men. A cash business could not be done, and it was known that I did not have enough money to do a successful credit business. Stay in Citrus County, where I had made good, and they would continue to love me. Come to Dunnellon, and I was through. Such a remarkable culture for a town. Without doing the math, I'm thinking this is about 130 years ago. Nothing has changed within the way the culture of the town in the entirety of 130 years. Mr. May did eventually move his business to Dunnellon. He bought or rented a storefront in the bad section of town where white folks did not travel. He rented that because it was the only thing available. He created a business. Eventually, he had a better merchandise, and folks did go and travel and do his business. He became one of the more successful businessmen in the town of Dunnellon. Ran for the city council and won election. The people that advised him never to come to town never forgave him. In one instance, Judge May was very civically minded, and the city of Dunnellon had no infrastructure of any type. The roads were rutted sand paths. There was no running water. There was no electric lights. There was nothing but a small police force of men that were basically thugs that worked for the saloon keepers. The city government consisted of about 4 policemen and a city clerk. They collected no property taxes in the city of Dunnellon. Their entire city budget was based on a $100 per year saloon tax. There were enough saloons in town to fund the city budget out of $100 per year for the number of saloons, which were around a dozen, I believe. Judge May, or Mr. May at the time, was shocked to get a tax bill, a very hefty tax bill for his business. When he inquired at the city council, which he was then a city council person, they said everybody pays their tax bill and be prepared to pay it, or at noon on Friday, the marshal will come and put a lock on your front door and you will be done. Judge May was in a pickle. He had no answer for that. The following day, he was on his way to the post office to drop in his mail, and as they walked by City Hall, the city clerk hailed him, said, "Mr. May." He responded, "Yes." The city clerk said, "I have to go down to the post office and do some business." He says, "I have the city records open here, and I don't want anybody to come in here and view them. Can you stand by the door and make sure that nobody comes into City Hall while I go down to the post office?" So, of course, Judge May did. He went in, and the tax book for the city was laying open, and the entirety of the tax bill for the town consisted of his. He confronted the city council at the next meeting, and they relented. They did not charge him a tax bill. A year or two later, one of the very early civic projects for the town of Dunnellon, Judge May had gone to the city council and gained approval to begin paving the main street, which is now US 41, with waste from the phosphate mines. It was a kind of a clay that served as a good road base, and the phosphate mines had agreed to contribute all that he could possibly carry away if he would pay for the laborers to spread it out and create a paved road, but to speak of, rather than a sand path. After a week's work, which Mr. May paid out of his own pocket, he approached the city council for $40 for reimbursement for paying his workmen for the week's work. And they refused to pay. And he said, well, it had been guaranteed in the prior meeting, and they had agreed to pay. And by then they had forgotten about it and asked him if it was in writing, which of course it was not. So they refused to pay. And Judge May said, well, I'm going to get my money. So one of the other city councilmen that had a little bit of ethics agreed that he should get his money. And the mayor, not wanting to get in the middle of it, said, I'll have no part of that, so y'all figure it out. So they were left with his $40 claim on the money that he had spent that was due reimbursement. And the city council sat in a deadlock all night and into the next morning. Sometime well past midnight, one of the merchants that had originally told him not to come to town finally relented and said, hey, we got to go home at some point. You're kind of a chump, but we'll give you your $40 so we can go home. So for many years after that, the city of Dunnellon had exactly 100 feet of paved road that E.C. May had to functionally shut down the city government with parliamentary procedure to get his money. At the end of the phosphate boom era in 1914, all of the businesses collapsed. All of the business people that had threatened him and shut him down, they all went bankrupt. Judge May, being a very savvy and smart man, stayed up and read law books, took the Florida bar and became an attorney, eventually became county judge, state attorney, representatives in the House of Representatives for Citrus County area. Over the years and reading his book, I think a lot of the knuckleheads that had looked down on him when he came to Dunnellon as a merchant came before him for bad behavior as a judge. And at least the way he states it, that he was fair in the way he dealt with it, with the knuckleheads that had looked down on him when he was nobody. Dunnellon's a very fantastic and interesting place because you can read through the news of the 1930s, 1970s, or a month ago, and you still have the same broken culture, and it's amazing. And I always refer back to the way that they treated Judge E.C. May. He left here about the way he started, with very little. He moved not very far away to Inverness and spent the rest of his life as a county judge and in the House of Representatives. It's kind of an interesting story in Judge E.C. May, and that's even to this day, some folks refer to Judge May in his book as embellishing the way he wrote it, which perhaps it is. You would have to read the book. I've read it perhaps 20 times now. But at the end of the day, he was the county judge, so you can't embellish that. You're either go from a nobody to being the county judge and in the House of Representatives, or you don't. It kind of his record speaks for itself. Judge E.C. May is a cool guy. I've always enjoyed reading his story. It's well worth the read.